Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvase Sasunyavadi Pastyata Devashatana Vanchakalpa Tirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, this morning we were given the topic of obstacles in spiritual life or spiritual life in difficult times. So, it's a very rich topic and an important topic we have to discuss this morning. Sometimes we may have the feeling that when we become devotees, our problems will be over. And we can become disappointed and confused and upset once we become devotees and our problems are not over. Our problems continue, or maybe they even get worse. So this is not, this material world is a place of problems, unfortunately. It's an ocean of problems. Srila Prabhupada made the analogy that to try to become Krishna conscious is like declaring war on the illusory energy. And the illusory energy responds. The illusory energy can set up so many obstacles, so many difficulties for us. If you think of this word war, it's a very alarming thing. If the illusory energy declares war on us, we're very small. The illusory energy is very powerful. And we can think, many of you are from Great Britain, so during the war, World War II, I'm sure you've heard, there was great danger. The Germans were bombing England. Very often there's shortages during war. And then the young people are drafted, they're sent off, and the parents are left full of anxieties. So to declare war on the illusory energy is not a joke. We need great fortification to do that. Some of the ways we can look at this attack by the illusory energy, one thing I like to reflect on is this idea of our insignificance. The other night we were speaking about how Krishna is unlimited, inconceivably unlimited, but just for something we can encompass within our minds, we can compare Krishna to the vast ocean. Like take the Atlantic Ocean, it's hundreds of miles north to south, hundreds of miles east to west, very, very deep. So it's an enormous body of water. And if you take one drop, what is the significance of that one drop? It's insignificant. So similarly, Krishna is unlimited in all his qualities, all his aspects, his power. And we are like one drop, insignificant. It does not mean that we're not important. Those two things shouldn't be confused. Krishna is the most important. We are part of him. So we are also important. You can see that in a child. When a child creates a painting or creates something, the child will go to his or her parents and say, look what I've done, look what I've done. So proud that this is my creation. And that's very natural. So each of us, in that sense, is important, yet we're insignificant. When Prabhupada first arrived in the United States, he wrote a beautiful Bengali poem expressing his deepest feelings, and he signed that the most insignificant beggar. So devotees, pure devotees, are very comfortable with the idea of their own insignificance. Also, if you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the author, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, occasionally speaks of his own feelings about himself. And he thinks very lowly of himself. It's astonishing. He's such an exalted personality, so knowledgeable, so full of feelings for the Lord and his devotees and his pastimes. And yet when he talks about himself, he talks how insignificant he is. Don't even remember his name. But for those of us who are conditioned, this idea of being insignificant is not welcome. We want to be important. We want to be significant. We want to be noticed. And therefore, even in a spiritual society, when we come with this conditioning, you will find material ambition, competition, posturing is not unusual. Because just to come to grips with this idea that I am insignificant, that's very hard on the false ego. It's a strain on the false ego. So this is an obstacle for us that we can look at. Another obstacle could be that in this world, especially at this time, there's so many godless people, whether they're politicians or businessmen or scientists, and they have this idea that God is unimportant, he doesn't exist. And influenced by this, which is very pervasive at this time, we can start to think that maybe I should be earning money and enjoying myself. Maybe my life is misdirected, devoting myself to God. So this is a very strong push also that we in Krishna consciousness must push against conscientiously. There's a beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that acting within the core of the heart of philosophers who have many different ideas about reality, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sometimes makes them agree with each other and sometimes makes them disagree with each other. And meanwhile, they completely overlook that their identity is a spirit soul. So we don't want to be in that camp where we're overlooking our actual identity and instead just creating philosophies and arguing with each other about these philosophies. This is a massive waste of time and waste of the human intelligence as well. A very unfortunate thing to have happen. Also, in this world, as I was saying, there's so many conflicts, there's so much stress, so many difficulties, so much pain. And these things can overwhelm us also. This can be another obstacle. We get so caught up in the inevitable problems of this world that we forget our actual purpose in this life. But actually all these things are subsidiary to our main enemy, which is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is asked by Arjuna, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly? And Krishna very clearly says it is lust, Arjuna, the all-devouring sinful enemy of each one of us. And accompanying lust, like bedfellows, is greed and anger and envy, illusion. So these are huge problems, huge obstacles in Krishna consciousness. There was a devotee named Hayagriva. He was one of Prabhupada's first editors. He was an English professor. And he wrote a letter to Prabhupada expressing his difficulty with lust. And Prabhupada wrote back quite a unique letter. And he said, he called Mr. Lust, he made it a person, Mr. Lust. I understand your problems with Mr. Lust, but you should know that Krishna is more powerful than Mr. Lust, than his grandfather, than his great-grandfather, than his son and his son-in-law, and his grandson. So Krishna is more powerful than lust. We can try to turn to him and take shelter of him to overcome these powerful forces, lust, greed, and anger. There's a nice analogy. Just maybe last Sunday, it rained most of the day. So when it rains, you can go out into the rain, and as a consequence, you get all wet. Sometimes you get cold. It takes your shoes days to dry out. Or an alternative is you can stay inside and just watch it, knowing that it's going to pass. The weather will pass. Weather does that. So similarly, when we're attacked by lust, it's not that we have to become lusty. We can know that this is an attack, just like the rain is a passing phenomenon, and it will go as it came. Similarly, greed and anger. It's not that we have to respond to them in kind, but we let them go. And this kind of detachment gives us strength. And it's not just detachment, we also have knowledge of Krishna. And also we have some taste for devotional life. Perhaps a taste for chanting. I know all of you are probably tired from chanting so late last night. It's one thing that's so enlivening about the young people in Krishna consciousness. They love kirtan. So whatever taste you have, you can relish that taste, and that will also help you overcome these obstacles, these very serious obstacles that we have in spiritual life. I have 2 daughters, and the eldest one is married now. Her husband's name is Shyam Kishore. And he was born and raised in America, but his parents are from Gujarat, his mother and father. So he was raised in a traditional family, and he went to college, 4-year college in the United States. And during those 4 years, he never broke the regulative principles. He was not initiated, but he never had illicit sex, he never ate meat, fish, or eggs, he never gambled, never took intoxicants, which in America, and maybe in England too, is kind of a miracle, more or less a miracle. So I asked him, how did you do that? So one thing was that his elder brother was his roommate for some of that time, which was a great asset. But also he told me something very interesting. He said, I could not have come before my father having broken one of those regulative principles, which is something I don't think you would hear from a Westerner. But he said that, and it was very impressive. It means that we feel responsible. Those who are cultured feel responsible to the people that we're indebted to, as he felt responsible to his father. Similarly, and along the same lines, there's a devotee you've probably heard, Giriraj Swami. He was in Juhu when he was a brahmachari, doing a lot of service under very difficult circumstances for trying to help Prabhupada acquire the property there. And if you know the history of Juhu, the owner was trying to cheat us out of the property, Mr. Nair. And there were many intrigues, the lawyers were in cahoot. Very, very difficult situation that went on for years and was really a headache for Srila Prabhupada. And Giriraj, at that time brahmachari, stayed in Juhu, trying to deal with the situation, in constant contact with Srila Prabhupada. And at one point, this Mr. Nair thought he wanted to defame Giriraj, so he actually sent a prostitute, very similar to the story of Haridas Thakur and the prostitute, sent by Ramachandra Kant. So this prostitute, and Giriraj was alone, it was at night, and she comes and does whatever prostitutes do. And, Giriraj said I could, no one would know, just me and her. And then he thought about Srila Prabhupada, very similar to Shyam Kishore Das, thinking about his father. And he said, no, I cannot come before Srila Prabhupada having done anything like this. So this is another way that we can protect ourselves from succumbing to these obstacles, is to feel indebted to those who have given us so much, so selflessly, and want to honor them with our behavior, with our mentality. And this mentality will protect us when temptation is there. So we can feel also another aspect, as I was saying, just like on Sunday, the storm came and went. Everything material will come and go. It's momentary. It may last a day, like the rainstorm, or may last a week, it may last a few years. Whatever it is, it's going to come and go. That's the nature of this world. And the opportunity that we have is momentous. Right? The material is momentary, and the opportunity, the spiritual opportunity, is momentous. So we have to use our intelligence use our sensibility, our common sense, not to go for the momentary, but to strive for the momentous, which is the spiritual life that's been offered to us. And understand always that our identity is spiritual. We're not these bodies, we're spirit souls. We have an extraordinary future before us if we can hang on to that understanding and allow it to grow. And Prabhupada was very practical. He was the epitome of practicality. He wanted each and every one of us to succeed in spiritual life. And therefore he gave us this process which is quite doable, sadhana bhakti. The word sadhana is, of course, a Sanskrit word, and it means going straight along the path. Going straight along the path. It also means efficient. It also means healing or cure. And in Bhakti Yoga, it means executing devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead with the aim of achieving love of God. That is sadhana bhakti. And we know the basics of sadhana. Prabhupada has given us, rising early and attending the programs, associating, reading, following the principles. This raises our life. It makes us pious. And when you add the chanting of the holy names, then it becomes transcendental. And it's quite attainable. And it is something that is very deep as well. We can really go inward through the process of sadhana, understanding those spiritual truths that we've been given, and tasting them as well, feeling them, feeling our existence as an eternal part of Krishna. These are extraordinary opportunities. And we find that those who take up Bhakti Yoga, they're willing to do all sorts of sometimes apparently strange things in order to try to please Krishna. If you've read Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, there are all sorts of unusual things that devotees do in an effort to serve Krishna and Prabhupada. And then also we can be daring in that way. It's not that we have to be very sedate, but there is possibilities for being very daring if we have that propensity within us. Take risks for Krishna, not senseless risks, sensible risks, according to our propensities. So it's a great opportunity for us in that sense. And also there are challenges in the sense that if you look at the word routine, routine can mean doing a set number of things over a period of time, a standard number of things, which is sadhana bhakti, what we do every day. But routine can also, another definition of routine can mean that it becomes ordinary, it becomes habitual, it becomes something that we do unconsciously. And there's a great danger in sadhana if it becomes routine in that sense. Just like, for example, when we come to Mangal Arati, we sing these beautiful prayers. And these prayers have, if we read the translation and take it in, it means the spiritual master is saving us. He's pouring a rain cloud down on us to save us from this samsara, this fire of material life. So this is something quite extraordinary. But if we're just singing and not thinking, then it's routine in the sense of habitual, of unconscious, and it can become an obstacle. We may lose our taste in that sense for what we're doing. And that is a great, great loss. And part of the assets, part of the wealth of this Pandavasena group is that we can help each other, not let it be routine in that sense, that it becomes something ordinary, something we take for granted. I had the fortune, I was a photographer, trained in photography, so I was fortunate to travel with Srila Prabhupada when he was on his tours. So when we were in the United States, I noticed that twice during his tours, once in New York City, at that time at the 55th Street building in Manhattan, and again in Philadelphia, Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana, giving his morning class, and he challenged us. He said, you sing this song every morning, Sri Guru Charana Padma. Do you know the meaning? Do you know the meaning? He said this song is written in simple Bengali language, but every word is profound. Every word is replete with import that's very important to us. And it was after that we started reciting the meaning in English. But this is what I'm saying about routine. If we just sing these words, or go through these motions, or chant our japa, in a way that's habitual rather than conscious, we won't get the benefit. And this can be a serious obstacle for us in Krishna consciousness. I wonder if at this point there are any reflections that you might have, or any point to discuss. Of course, there's so much more to be said. We have about 20 minutes. Yes?
Thank you, Mataji. You were telling before that we should not strain ourselves, like the Prabhupada said, in this case, not to build too high, very temple. And then again, we are speaking about hunting the rhino and being, how do you say, courageous or bold and set high goals and risks. So how do we combine this? How do we know when to take risks and when to not strain ourselves?
Yeah, there was a devotee who lived in Los Angeles who was very enthusiastic for serving Tulsi Devi. She did that for years, every day, all day. Her name was HG Dasi. And at some point she wrote a long letter to Srila Prabhupada with maybe 18 different questions about the service of Tulsi Maharani. And Prabhupada wrote back, and he answered each question one by one. And then he came to one question, he said, in response to this question, use your common sense, and if you don't have any, ask someone who does. So, in that sense, sometimes we will strain ourselves, and that's due to a lack of common sense. So we need to find somebody who can help us, perhaps, in that way. In our youthful enthusiasm, we may do too much and hurt ourselves physically, and that's not recommended. This body is a temple. Krishna lives within it. And so we want to honor the body, get the rest we need, get the prasadam we need, have the diversity in our lives that we need. And at the same time, we don't want to use those needs as an excuse for being lethargic. So it requires some balance, some maturity, and we may need help finding that balance. In our younger days, there were many devotees that went on book distribution all day, every day. And although that was 40-something years ago, to this day they're still suffering physically from doing too much, more than they were actually capable of doing. So yeah, it's something to be conscious of and aware of, that kind of balance. So, part of the rewards of devotional service may not be external, they may be internal. We may find some kind of joy and enthusiasm swelling up within us from participating in this process. We might find some kind of happiness that was unknown to us before. And at the same time, in some circumstances, we may find our enthusiasm wane. We may find that we're not so inclined for the process of Krishna consciousness. This is a very real problem. So what do we do in that situation? If we find, I don't feel like going to the temple now. Maybe I don't feel like participating in kirtan. What is the difficulty, you may say? So that's something really to look at. That's something that can be very real, some problem. Part of the difficulty may be, as I said, this idea of routineness. And another part could be that not only are we taking devotional service as something ordinary, which it is not. When we sing every morning to Tulsi Devi, one of the parts of the prayer is, please give me the privilege of devotional service. The idea that we can serve Krishna is a great privilege. And we should not take that for granted. And also the idea that Krishna's devotees are not ordinary. Krishna's devotees are extraordinary. There's a statement in the Bhagavatam Lord Shiva is talking about the devotees, and he says the highest achievement of human life is to have association with devotees. The highest achievement of human life. So, because there's so many of us, maybe we're taking each other for granted. And Krishna does not look kindly upon that. That may incline us to lose our taste for Krishna consciousness. This very place that we're in Mayapur, I don't know if you know the history of it. Prabhupada was here, I think, 3 times during his pastimes with us. He actually stayed in the room upstairs that we visit. And at one point it had 250 devotees living here. 250. Devotees came from all over to live in New Mayapur, and then they would go all over France, distributing books, collecting money, very successfully. It was bubbling with activity. And because the leader there could not maintain his Krishna consciousness, it created complete havoc. Complete havoc. And one wonders, well, what happened? You know, the leader was doing so much service, printing books, sending devotees out to distribute books. So there may be many answers to that question. I was not personally present during that time, but my impression was, from being around this particular person, that he stopped honoring devotees. He somehow or other, he considered devotees ordinary. And that became tragic. That became completely tragic. Krishna does not look kindly upon that mentality. And thus this personality lost his taste. And there was, as I say, there was havoc. There's still perhaps reeling from that havoc. So there's things to be learned from our history, very important lessons. And one of them is to honor devotional service. Anything that we can do for Krishna is something very special, something extraordinary. And honor the devotees who are trying to perform devotional service. There's a statement in the Bhagavatam that there is no greater obstruction to one's growing in Krishna consciousness than to think other subject matters are more important than one's self-realization. There is no stronger obstruction to one's self-interest than to think other subject matters are more important than one's self-realization. So that's not to say that we can't earn money or be active in business or be active as students. Our question is how to prevent sadhana from becoming routine in the sense that it's habitual and done unconsciously. So that is the value of association. As somebody else who's excited about the opportunity to come to Mangalarti, we want to associate with that person. And also if we can study the meanings of the prayers, samsara dava, study the meaning, it's extraordinary. Or as Prabhupada was challenging us with the morning song, Sri Guru Charana Padma, those words are so profound. He is my Lord, life after life. From him ecstatic prema emanates. These words are so meaningful, so important for us. So yeah, I always recommend association, and the beauty of the Pandavasena is that you have each other to associate with. So please take advantage of that and help each other grow in Krishna consciousness. Well, if you don't have questions, I'm going to read to you. Hare Krishna. Please try to hear. We're going to read. This is the 4th canto, chapter 22. Prithu Maharaj is a great emperor, and he's meeting with the 4 Kumaras, who are exalted devotees. Please try to hear this. It's a verse and maybe 1 page. It's going to be a big challenge. This is the verse spoken by one of the Kumaras. When one's mind and senses are attracted to sense objects for enjoyment, the mind becomes agitated. As a result of continually thinking of sense objects, one's real consciousness almost becomes lost. Like the water in a lake that is gradually sucked up by the big grass straws on its bank. Shall I read the verse once more? When one's mind and senses are attracted to sense objects for enjoyment, the mind becomes agitated. As a result of continually thinking of sense objects, one's real consciousness almost becomes lost, like the water in a lake that is gradually sucked up by the big grass straws on its bank. Hare Krishna. So this is from Prabhupada's purport, just part of it. When the mind is allowed to think of sense gratification continuously, it becomes the cause of our material bondage. If our mind is simply filled with sense gratification, even though we want Krishna consciousness, by continuous practice we cannot forget the subject matter of sense gratification. The example given here is very appropriate. If a big lake is covered all around by long kusha grass, just like columns, the waters dry up. Similarly, when the big columns of material desire increase, the clear water of consciousness is dried up. Therefore, these columns of kusha grass should be cut or thrown away from the very beginning. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructed that if from the very beginning we do not take care of unwanted grass, then the water will be used by this unwanted grass and that the water will dry up. The material desire for sense enjoyment is the cause of our fall down in this material world, and thus we suffer the threefold miseries and continuous birth, death, old age, and disease. However, if we turn our desires toward the transcendental loving service of the Lord, our desires become purified. We cannot kill desires. We have to purify them of different designations. Hare Krishna. That was just part of the purport. I'm trying to enliven you to read Prabhupada's books. They're so vast and encompassing. Any other thoughts? We still have a few minutes. Everyone's tired. Kirtan, late kirtan.